this computer. There we go. All right, so we are recording. This session will be available for people if you have somebody who didn't get to participate, or a coworker that you would like to give it to, and the link will be sent to you as well if you want to watch any sections over again. So these will be available on the department's website afterwards. So welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us. My name, I said earlier, for those of us just joining us, is Dee Sokier, and we're going to talk today about phonological awareness and phonics. There is a time for questions at the end, but if you have a question that comes into your mind while we're going through the session, please feel free to add it in the chat box. Leanne Larson, who is the Early Learning Coordinator for our Office of Early Learning at the department, is also on, and she did this job before I did, so I'm sure that she could answer your questions, or we can save them for the end. And so if you have questions while we go through, please feel free to ask them. So starting off, I have too many screens going here. All right, so as I said, everyone is coming unmuted because there are a number of people. This is a large Zoom group, so we have a few norms to go through. You can turn your video on if you'd like, but right now I'm sharing my screen, so I'm not sure if people are going to be able to see that. If you have any questions, you can post them in the comment box, and it might be helpful if you put your full name in the comment box or your email if we don't get time to do it, and I can follow up with it that way from the chat. There will be time for that at the end, and I'll try to get to as many of those as I can if I scroll back up. Like I said, there will be a recording available, and at the end, there'll be a link to a survey so that you can get a certificate for your participation. So a little bit about me. That's me in the purple shirt right there, and I was a teacher, a classroom teacher, and an interventionist here in Penobscot County for 27 years. In just about 2.5 weeks, I will have been at the Department of Education for 2 years. And the picture down there at the bottom is a picture of my family. I'm calling them my office mates because starting from the left, that's my youngest daughter. She is a sophomore for 1 more week at Worcester Polytech. She is doing remote learning from home, which I like to tell everybody she's not built for remote learning. She is missing Worcester, and she's missing her friends. Yes, Yvonne, you do work with Haley. She recognized your name. That's myself. That's my husband, Todd. And that's the far right is my daughter, Haley. She's a 4th grade teacher at the Mill Pond School in Hodgdon, and this is her first year of teaching. And so this has been an interesting beginning to a career in education. Certainly is unique, a unique way to start. But she's embraced it, and she's done it. Thank you, Yvonne. So why we're here. So this series that you've signed up for, that you've registered for, has a lot of kind of the basics of foundational literacy for elementary literacy. And you can see that these are they're on this pie chart in equal amounts because they're all kind of the foundations that build up and when we build our reading skills. And today we're going to talk about the phonological awareness and the phonics piece. Oh, I seem to have, oh, there we go. So we're going to talk about this and these two pieces of the pie, but they're all important for reading. We have other sessions coming up. Some of the other series, there's 3 more. We have one on comprehension and fluency, one on vocabulary and language, and then we have another session that is on writing. So one of the things that's important, I think, that we forget in education is that we're really good at throwing around definitions and terminology, and we don't always think about what those things mean, so that we don't always have a common understanding, and sometimes there are confusions there. So just a few common understandings of some key terminology that you'll hear here or that you might hear in your schools. So phonological awareness is kind of, you think about it, it's all the things that have to do with phonics that don't involve writing, that don't involve print. They're things that are all oral. things that you can do to manipulate sounds and phrases and parts of words. And it's a wide range of skills, but it's all things that you do without access to print. I always think of them, the phonological awareness pieces, as the pieces that you could do with, if it was completely dark, there's still things that you could do. Phonemic awareness is a piece of that. It's kind of a little subset, and it's about the smallest sounds. It's the sounds in there. And those two pieces are where we're going to start today. Phonics is once you get into the print and you have that relationship between the sounds and what those letters are that represent it. Decoding, it's one of the hardest things. It's how we teach our students to make meaning of print. And then we attach those sounds to printed letters and then connect it back to oral language. And that's how they read those words. And then encoding would be the opposite. It's figuring out the sounds, attaching them to print, and being able to write them, which makes for a very complicated process. That's why I often laugh when people say learning to read really is rocket science. Automaticity, that's that piece that we would like to see for students. We would like to see them automatically retrieve those words and not have to work at making that effort and having to sound out words or to work through them. Again, once that automaticity comes, they can do word recognition in a very fast pace, and they don't have to think about it. It's just when you're reading, very little of what you're doing, you're not doing very much decoding. You're just reading because it's an automatic process of word recognition. The phonemes they're the smallest units of sounds. We have 44 phonemes that we put together to make words in all different ways, and the sounds that we use for them. We have 26 letters in the English language, but again, we combine them to make 44 sounds. And then graphemes are how we write those down. That's how we have, so one grapheme, an M represents the sound of but we can do 2-letter graphemes. So CH would say ch, or 3 letters, and so on. So some sound and spelling patterns that we have. The English language is very tricky. We like to really keep people on their toes with the sound and spelling patterns. For example, there are 5 sound and spelling patterns just for the letter A. You can have A by itself, like in the word April. You can have A with a silent E, like the word game. AI as a combination, like in the word pain. AY at the end of the word, like the word day. Or EIGH, like in the word wait. So there are a lot of sound and spelling patterns that make phonological awareness and phonics very difficult for some of our students to learn. And then some other things that we're going to get into more, syllable, the parts of a word each part of a word that includes a vowel. The onset of a word is the part of the word that's in front of the vowel, and the rhyme is the part that includes the vowel. So in the word dog, the onset is the d, and the og is the rhyme. And then we're going to talk as we move along about blending and segmenting, which is about blending is combining all of those parts of the words, whether it's syllables and onset and rhyme, or whether it's the individual phonemes to make a word. And segmenting is the opposite process of taking those and pulling them apart. So those are just some words that you're going to hear and some references that we're going to make today to kind of put us all on a common understanding of what those things mean when we're talking. So moving right along, kind of some important things to think about when we're thinking about phonemic awareness, phonological awareness, and phonics. If intentional instruction in these things is beneficial for all students, but it's really crucial for our tangled learners. And I know a lot of you work in either in Title I or in classroom assistance or in special education. And a lot of who you're seeing are those tangled learners. So that's really a lot of what you're seeing in your day. So studies have proven that all students benefit from intentional instruction in phonological awareness and phonics, but it's especially important for our tangled students. Students who can't do the phonological awareness pieces about manipulating sounds and distinguishing sounds in an oral sense have a much more difficult time, which is why we're going to talk about the phonological awareness piece first, because they have a much more difficult time making connections to the print when it comes to the phonetic code. I said earlier there are 26 letters but the students then have to turn those into 44 sounds. And a lot of the skills that we expect our students to have and really master in phonological awareness are really challenging for students, because up to the time that they've gotten to school age, everything that they've been practiced or everything that they've learned has been from a very broad, concrete stance. When they learn to talk, communication is about the whole. They learn things like the concept of a chair. There's a red chair, blue chair, but it's always a chair. And then when we ask them to learn phonological skills, we're asking them to make really small connections, but we're asking them to do that without that meaning and all of those pieces, because it makes it very difficult for them to do that. It doesn't have a concrete meaning to them. When they're learning to talk, it has meaning and they have application and there's rewards to speaking and encouraging their talk. But then we ask them to do phonological skills, and those are very difficult for some of our students. So we'll hopefully be able to address that. So phonological awareness kind of follows a continuum, like most things, from more easy skills on the left-hand side, which include rhyme and alliteration, all the way up to then when we get into the more complicated areas of phonemes, which is those smallest sounds. So we're going to take a walk through these so that you can kind of process through what those might look like for you, and for what you might look like for some activities for your students. So starting with some things, so oral rhyme. This is the most simple. These are the most simple activities in the progression. And these are the things that will be able to, your students will be able to do most easily. And again, remember, this is all oral. These aren't the things that are involved with print yet. So these are the things that you are going to do orally, and you're going to be able to do them so your students can enjoy them. And a lot of these can be made very fun. So we think about singing songs with students that have rhymes in them and pointing them out. Reading poems to them. A lot of times you can read poems. There's many nursery rhymes and poems that have rhyming endings that become very predictable for students, and they can fill in that word after they've practiced it. One of the easier skills is to identify words that rhyme. So they might touch their nose if they're standing in line to go someplace. You might say dog, cat, and they might touch their nose if they rhyme, because identifying that rhyme is easier. And then you might try the same thing with dog, log, so that they can make those determinations and just indicate when words rhyme. The next more difficult thing is to produce words that rhyme. That is a little bit more difficult on the progression when we think of those things. So if you give them a word and then they can do a word that rhymes with that word. So that might look, I'm going to say big, and then students can rhyme. I always caution people to be a little bit careful with some of these, because some words that you're asking for rhyme, make sure that you know what words might rhyme with them. I've sat in many classrooms where the teacher has tried to avoid some of the rhymes that come up, and they do, and I've often just kind of skimmed right over those, because you never know what kids are going to come up with for a rhyme. They put different beginnings, they put different onsets on there, and you never know what's going to come out of their mouth. Another alliteration and oral activity is to distinguish between the beginnings of the sound of words. So you might say to them, which word doesn't sound the same at the beginning, and you might give them 4 words: big, dog, bunny, and bacon. And they might have to start that, and you might start those all with single syllable words, but they're going to be identifying which one of those does not have the same beginning sound. And then as you move into alliteration, you can create some sounds and some phrases, or 2 words that begin the same. Super Sam. There are many alliteration activities that you can do. You can with their names. Dan likes donuts. Jim likes jelly beans. So using those sounds that are, and connecting them to their names, because most students are, that's a real strong anchor point for them, is that name. And then again, taking those words and connecting them to other words. You might even use them in the content. If you're doing a content and you're studying in the spring and you're out studying frogs, you might be able to connect it orally during some time, you know, a small period of time in your day. If they're doing words about the ponds that you're doing, you might have frog and bog, and they might be able to make some other words that they can list of words that rhyme, because those are vocabulary words that they're using, and then you can connect them that way. Same thing is true for a rhyme of the day. You might choose a word, and then each time, you know, a student hears a word that rhymes with that word, they can do that. The same thing can continue throughout your week. You can post them if you'd like, but this is really the part of the time that you are really working orally and making those intentional conversations and pointing out to students when those words rhyme, because this is really about refining and working towards them listening, because this is when they're identifying. And it's such a hard skill for some students to really process through what this might look like and what this might sound like to them, because many times they have a hard time knowing if it's that first sound and then moving back and forth between first sound or rhyming sound. And those are very confusing. So the more they practice them orally, the easier they're going to be for them. As we move up the progression in phonological awareness, the next thing that we think about is words and sentences. It's really important because a lot of times when students have started as they're little and they're first hearing books read to them, they think that the concept of a story or print is that that's happening from a book because there are pictures there. And that's one of the things that they do. And they're not really clear that when we speak or when we write, that it's made up of multiple words. And so at the next level is when you're going to start using your ability to orally be able to get students to separate words and sentences. So you might have them use manipulatives. You might say, I can see a big brown dog. Or you might say, it is sunny today. And you're going to say them not artificially, but you're going to say them a little bit more slowly. And they might use their fingers or they might use counters to count how many words are in that sentence, because it's important for them to know that there are individual words that make up a sentence. And they're not writing them down, but they are having the individual parts of that. Another task or another activity that is interesting for students is for them to say two sentences and to identify the word that is different. So they might say something, you might say the sentence, a big dog ate a bone. And then you might say to them, a big dog ate a cracker. And then they're identifying which word is not the same. And that is just giving them the idea that there are different words and different sentences there. And then you might even bring them to finding a word. If you're using alliteration in your sentences, locate the sound that doesn't start the same. Mom makes me munch peanuts. Which word in that sentence doesn't have the same sound at the beginning? So you're really working with a variety of sentence manipulation. And again, this is all orally. These are all things that they're doing, and they're listening to you because they're getting these concepts phonologically that they are not yet worried about the print piece. So the next level, as we move up the staircase of complexity and the progression, is thinking about the syllables. Now we've gotten past the number of sentences, they're moving past the number that there are words in sentences, and now we're going to start breaking down and looking at the words. So we're going to think about the syllables in words, and remember back to those common definitions that the syllables are those parts, everything that each part of a word, each part of the syllable that has vowels in it. So they might count syllables, again, orally. You might say the word, and you might model that for them, clapping the word, dog, one syllable, one clap. When you start getting into multi-syllable words, the easiest thing to start with is compound words, because those are the most concrete and understandable for them, because they are made up of two words that are real words, and they don't have to just break them into sounds. They're much more likely to understand the syllables and be able to separate the syllables in snowman, although I'm not happy that we're going to have snow again. So I'm a little disappointed that I'm thinking snowman, but they're much easier to divide into snowman than they are, say, the word stable, because they're stay and bull don't make real words. So when you start breaking apart syllables and asking them for parts of them, you want to start with those compound words. And then as you move to more complex words, think about the first syllable or the end of the syllable. And there are lots of things that students can do with those to make those concrete. They can tap them, they can clap them. You can have them jump for how many syllables are in a word. You can get those counters that you used in words and sentences back out and have them slide the counters for syllables. And you're going to do that in both ways. They're going to segment. You can say 2 syllables. Again, this is that same skill that's going to come up again when we look at phonemes. You're going to say things like snow, man, blend those syllables together to have them make a word. And then you're going to move again from those along into more parts of words with more syllables, so that they can practice that all in an oral sense. And then after you move in from syllables, you're going to move on to onset and rhyme. The next more complicated session kind of sliding up there. And again, you're going to do those same things, blending the onset and rhyme, which you're going to, again, saying it to them and making them blend those sounds. If I have this and og, blend that to make a word. What is the first sound you hear in dog to segment the word? They're going to separate that, d and og. So they're going to go the opposite way. And again, they're going to be able to do that with manipulative. Sometimes if they have a manipulative in front of them and they know there's 2 sounds, they're going to be able to do that so that they can have a concrete thing for them to touch to make that a little bit easier for them. And then we come to the most complicated part of phonological awareness, which would be those phonemes. Now we're on to the little sounds. They've gone through all of the different parts of it. They've broken down now from the idea and the concept of rhyme and alliteration. They've moved across the number of words and that words make up those thoughts and our language and our print. And then they've moved into the syllables and then the bigger parts of onset and rhyme. And now we're talking about those small phonemes. And so they're going to do all of those same skills, only now we're breaking it down very simple. And when you're changing a phoneme and identifying which are the same, you want to start with the beginning. You want to start, that's the easiest place for you to begin for students to identify, is that initial phoneme. And then you're going to want to start with the ending phoneme, manipulating the phoneme that falls at the end, and the middle phoneme to save until the end, because that's a much more complicated place to identify and work with and manipulate phonemes. So again, start by generating words. Let's think of words that all begin with b. Let's think of words that all begin with m. And then again, same thing, you're going to generate words, things that come at the end. Then identifying phonemes. And remember, this is about the phoneme, this is about the sound, not the letter. So when you're identifying your phoneme that comes at the beginning, remember they're identifying what sound starts at the beginning of man, what sound is at the end of man, so that they're really playing with those sounds, because this isn't about naming the letter at this point. This is about the sounds that they hear in words and knowing that words are made up of those sounds. Then you might change phoneme. So if you have the word cat, you might say the beginning phoneme, the beginning sound of cat, and they could say the k, and change that. What if I change the k to a mm? And then they're going to do some manipulation to change that and come up with new words. Isolate the phoneme so that they know what the sound is in a certain place in the word. Again, starting with the beginning and then the end and finishing with the middle. And again, starting with simple, short 2 and 3 phoneme sounding long length words so that they have a lot of success, and you're going to make that more difficult as you go along. Then the next session, as you move along, you're going to be blending phonemes. so that we can, you can make those into words. This is exactly, Mary, what you do in Spire, very similar, it follows that progression. And then you're going to be blending phonemes, and then again, just like you did with onset and rhyme and syllables, then you're going to be segmenting them into how you're going to make those, taking the words apart into different phonemes, and what might happen if you delete a phoneme. If you say Monday without the A, what would you have left? And then the more complicated as you move along is once you start counting phonemes. So they've gone back to manipulation. They've had manipulation of sentences, words in sentences, they've had syllables, and now they're really going to be getting along into phonemes. And that gets really tricky because there's that difference. And remember, we're all still working orally, but there's that difference. And some words are very difficult to break apart into exactly how many phonemes are in them. Words like cat are very simple, but it's important because that identification of the number of phonemes and really segmenting those phonemes are what's going to lead them into being able to record those phonemes and write them once they start making the phonics and letter connections. So those are really important things as they move along that are going to happen for them. So I know that some of you have programs that you're referring to, but one of the things that's hard, I think, for some folks is that to come up with resources. And so this is going to be, this is a good resource. It's been around for a long time. And this is the Florida Center for Reading Research has a really easy website, www.fcrr.org. And once you click on that, at the top, on the bar across the top, there's a word that says resources. And you click on that, and on the left-hand drop bar, down the left-hand side, there's a section that says Student Center Activities. And when you click on that, you get to a page that is going to give you, even if you don't own a program that you're working with in your school, it is going to give you a lot of opportunity to find activities and resources that you will be able to use for your interventions or supports that you're providing for your students. And they're divided into K1, 2, 3, and grades 4, 5. So they're not all just very early. They have, each section has a teacher resource guide, and then they have the topics, and the ones that we're talking about today are phonological awareness and phonics, but they have topics on vocabulary and many other areas. So you could click on those and go to that website, and a lot of the activities that we've talked about or the ideas that we've talked about, a lot of those are going to break down into more activities. So when you think about using pictures to support, pictures that they could sort, pictures of things that rhyme, before you again get into the print, there are a lot of resources there. So you could print out pictures that they could sort of the dog and the log and the frog. Sometimes you have to go through them first so that the students know what they're pictures of. Some of them aren't perfectly clear, but they're a great place for you to start. And it has just probably more, even if you don't have a program that you're using like Sound Sensible or any of those things, that has lots of great materials that you could use. And it is free, Ruth. Yes, all of the stuff on there is free and it's printable. So you can jump on there, and a lot of the things that we just went over with phonological awareness have a section, and then as we move forward into phonics, you're going to find those supports are there as well. So I just wanted to make sure that I led you there before we jumped back into phonics, or jumped into phonics. So now, once they've gotten all of those skills, and you wouldn't say that they have, that's kind of the basics and the foundation. But as you've developed those skills, the next progression is that we move along into phonics. And so phonics instruction is very important. So it's that piece where it's going to take and bring print, and it's going to make all those phonological awareness skills that you've used, and it's going to connect to print. So it's going to give the students the ability to match those sounds to the letter or letters that they represent, and it has to be in a logical and organized sequence. That's the thing that has been researched and proven time and time again, is that it's not just about instructing for phonics, it's also about doing it in a logical and organized sequence. So, and then that is going to lead to authentic opportunities for students to practice. So those are kind of just kind of the outlines of the kind of those key important features for phonics. So there's kind of two big schools of thought around phonics. And there's analytic phonics and synthetic phonics. So analytic phonics is when you look at a word and you start with the word. And so you might see the word hat and you're going to use all of the words. You might do an at chunk and you might really work with that, and you might look for patterns and phonemes, and that's how you do it. I used to do, back in the day, I think I had charts all over where they had word families and they could do that, and they did that. So synthetic phonics is more of, if you've heard anything recently about kind of the science of reading, or that argument that, that we're kind of working in the other direction. Synthetic phonics is that the students are first learning the sounds and the phonemes and graphemes, and then they're connecting them and they're using them to blend them and produce phonetic sounds. So again, they're learning the phonemes first. So kind of the argument over the years as the kind of science of reading, or the reading wars have heated up, is that not all students need the synthetic phonics, that it's too boring, and that, you know, it's just not going to happen. I think somebody said a comment a few minutes ago that it seems rather tedious, but the kids really like it. So what Tim Shanahan, who's been a researcher and writer in our field for a very long time, talks about is that it's proven that every student benefits from instruction in phonics. Our struggling learners benefit even more, but every student benefits. And by really breaking it apart, and his argument, not really against analytic phonics, but more for synthetic phonics, is because we're starting with those phonemes and sounds and we're really breaking them apart and teaching children to recognize them, that we're being very purposeful, and we're giving kind of a more effective level of practice. And we're really giving students the opportunity to practice, because you're making very intentional and purposeful discussions. And so what's going to happen is that your teaching decisions are going to lead you to be able to provide practice for your students. And so if you're thinking of an analytic phonics and you're thinking of the at chunk, and you've got that and you've used that word pattern, are all of your readings, are you going to be focusing on that, or will you get away from it and they won't have enough repetitions of practice? So he argues that we need to make that the benefit of synthetic phonics is that teachers can make very purposeful and guided decisions around that instruction and then the practice. So there are kind of 5 basic phonics skills that we think of. Students are learning the letter sounds. So they've done lots of letters and manipulations orally, and now they're learning those letter sounds that they've had in phonological awareness and phonemic awareness, and they're moving along into connecting those sounds into letters and the formation of letters and the names of the letters. That's a very common thing that we see in our youngest learners, is that inability to identify a letter sound. They might know the name of the letter, and you might say to them, what sound is at the beginning of pig? And they might say P. And so it's really important that they first have those letter sounds, because it's the sound that starts and then moving into the connection to the name of the letter and how the letter is formed. So and then we move towards, blending, because ultimately the goal of our phonics instruction is for students to really learn the whole alphabetic principle, the sounds that connect to the English language. And so it's not really about that there's a certain program or a certain exact, if you look at different continuums of learning and sounds, they vary a little bit. but it's really about just being purposeful in that instruction and then connecting those sounds to letters. And it's a little bit less about making sure that you're having, you know, that it's one program that's better than another, or one continuum, or one progression or scope and sequence that's better. It's really about being purposeful and making those purposeful connections so that students have an anchor for those things. So as we move along and you think about how these are going to look, we're going to break them apart a little bit. So once they've got those sounds, they've done a lot of phonemic awareness. Handwriting without tears is one example, but having a kind of an idea in their mind, an oral connection to how letters are formed. So they've got the sounds, they know where they are. There are many examples of kind of poems or little rhymes or things that give you that idea of connections. This is just a picture of one. There are many available, around and down, magic C, up and down. There are lots. It's really just important to kind of have a description that gives them a connection. And once they've got the sound and then they can make the connection to how that letter is formed, it really gives them a more concrete connection in their mind. And it's important during this time to practice a lot and to pay attention to their pencil grip. It's very ineffective, and it really hinders their writing fluency as they go along if while they're learning their letters and their letter formation, if we're not paying attention to how they're holding that pencil and really encouraging them to hold it the correct way. I know some of them come in with all different kinds of grips when they first come into school, and so it's just, that's an important piece of that when they're thinking about the sounds moving to the formation and that they're holding that pencil the right way. Then as you move along, you're going to, so blending is the next thing that they're going to do with those sounds in print. And so they've already done a lot of blending orally, and now they're going to connect it to print because that's what's going to lead them into their reading. And so they're going to blend words by sound. So they might write one sound at a time. And the teacher might say that, write a write a write a or write a d, g, and they're going to record those sounds as they go. This year we've done a pilot where I've been able to go visit in kindergarten, and it has been a new way of thinking for me as I've been there, as I've watched the students record sounds and not have them first make the connection to the letter. But it has been very powerful, and it's been a great model for them as I've seen the kindergarten teachers say those sounds and students record them and then reread what they've written and blend what they've written. So that's how, you know, they've started that way, and it's been really powerful to see how much students are able to do. Again, start with the smaller words, start by modeling, practice with those decodable words. Once they've done them, practice with the words that the sounds that you've started with, and whatever your scope is. A lot of programs or a lot of scope and sequence start with M as one of the first sounds that they learned, and keep practicing. There's no such thing as too much practicing and over practicing, and it might seem monotonous, it might seem tedious, but they need that practice to keep going along. They're going to have opportunities when we were doing that. That's one of the things that Shanahan reiterated and really reaches out and says repeatedly how important it is to make opportunities for them to practice, really make purposeful choices, that if those are the sounds that they've learned, that they have lots of opportunities to practice words with those same sounds that they have been learning and making those connections. And then as they move along from blending, another activity that they're going to do is segmenting. They started orally segmenting just like they did with blending. They're going to segment and they record the sounds that they hear. Teacher might start by magnetic letters. It might not even be forming the letters. She might model or share the pen, or he. Start with smaller words. Practice those words that are totally decodable and not really they're gonna be very predictable. Again, keep practicing and make as many opportunities for that authentic practice in their independent writing that they possibly can, so that they can move along into that and have the ability to record those things and practice that. And they won't be perfect at it at first. They won't always get the vowel. They won't always get the things. Just like when we talked about phonemic awareness, that initial consonant is probably the thing that they'll get first. But the more practice that they do, the more they're going to be able to do that. And then so those decodable words, but another thing that often comes up in conversation is words that don't follow the kind of the rules of the English language. They're not something that follows the traditional rules that we think of. Some words just can't be decoded, but students still need to be able to read and spell these words. And people call them all kinds of things. They call them high frequency words. They call them tricky words. They call them popcorn words. But they're all those words that don't really follow a rule, like the word buy. Some of them aren't very long, but they don't follow, what we think of when we think of that, or two with two O's. They're just tricky. And so the only way for students to really do that is to play games with them. They might look at them, cover, copy, write, check, put them on word walls, include them in their practice, and play games with them. Find them in their reading, practice them, and refer to them as much as you can. And those are just things that they're going to have to work on and get used to as they practice them, because as much as we would like to say that all words could be decoded with 26 letters and 44 sounds, that's just not true. And so it's important to point that out to students and really talk to them about it. Talk to why doesn't that follow? If it followed the rule, what would it sound like? If it followed those rules that we've practiced, and acknowledging that some words just don't, but they're going to have to be able to read them. And it's a lot easier for them to read and identify them than it is to spell and write them. So again, both are going to take practice, and they're going to be coming along as they go through. So that brings us to, that's kind of the overview. And this opens it up to, if there are questions, and I know Leanne has been answering a number of them as we've gone along. And I know that some people have asked about the PowerPoint. So at the end, I do have a link that you're going to fill out a survey, and the survey basically will send me your email. So you're going to have to make sure that you get your email correct in there, because that's what's going to give me the knowledge of who participated. And so once you've done that, I can send the slides, and I can back to you along with a certificate that shows that you participated. So I'm not sure if there are other questions so Jessica is asking, are there more words that are exceptions to the rules than rules that follow? So from what I've done for research, Jessica, and reading on that, the old, I don't know what you'd want to call it, kind of the old rumor or the old reason that people gave, well, I'm not going to teach phonics. I'm not going to teach them to break down phonics because it just is, there's too many words that don't follow the rules. And when we did a phonics training last summer, one of the things that they said was that about 80% of the words that we use follow what we would think of as kind of those traditional rules. And I have to say, the more work that I've done with phonics and the more I've kind of dug into that, the more I have thought that I don't think we give it enough credit that there are so many things that are close. It's a lot easier to think of the exceptions, but when you go through a synthetic phonics program and you think of those 5 sounds like I did for long A, there are a lot of ways to write them. But once you've gone through all of those ways and you've practiced and the kids have had practice and intentional instruction around that, it is it's amazing how few words fall out of that exception, kind of like the word have. Have doesn't follow in there, but it is a lot more prevalent. It is about 80% of the time that that's going to happen. That's going to follow the long A rule, one of those 5 ways, as opposed to the exception. You don't have to put your email in the chat. There'll be a link that you will type in. I have it in a bit.ly and I have it in a QR code, and that will make it so that you can do that. If you have a question that you want an answer to, you can put your email in there if you need something for me to answer directly. And so you're going to fill your email in on that. Anybody else have any questions? Were there any other things, Leanne, that didn't get answered as we went along? Or anything that you want to add? Leanne's been doing this much longer than I have.
Okay. I think I've answered most of the questions. There was one, I was just actually writing a response, which I'll post in a second. I think sometimes the worry about how many words follow typical phonetic patterns and those that don't has sometimes been the rationale for why it's not really as helpful to teach phonetic patterns or a very systematic approach. And Dee, you did a great job of addressing that really about 80 to 85% of the words in the English language really do follow those phonetic patterns. I think another reason that it's so critical, many of you, I am going to imagine, are working with younger kids where you're dealing with a lot of single syllable words, but those of you who work with older students, where multisyllabic words are more common in the text that they are reading, many of the syllables within those multisyllabic words do follow common phonetic patterns. And so the practice that students are getting early on with simple phonetic patterns will serve them well later as they start to see those multisyllabic words. And the more automatic they get with recognition of those patterns, the easier it is for them to isolate those patterns within multisyllabic words and be able to break those words apart more quickly, which is a really important skill, especially once they reach a point where just being able to recognize a word by sight, as many of, I'm sure you notice how much easier reading those beginning books becomes when kids recognize an entire word by sight or automatically. I think another thing that's really interesting about that the brain research is pointing out is that even though it appears that they're recognizing that word as an entire unit, when they study how your eyes as a reader work, your eyes still scroll all the way across that word. It's just that the brain is able to consolidate those letters and sounds so quickly that it just is recognized automatically. And that's what you want to see happen with multisyllabic words down the line, that those little parts are recognized so quickly that you can pull them together and know what that word is.
So Meredith said she missed her name. So Meredith, I'm Dee Soster. I'm the elementary literacy specialist at the department. And Leanne Larson is the other person on here, and she is the coordinator of the early learning team in the department. So thank you. Some people were still in the waiting room. They might have missed that. Amanda asked if students with dyslexia learn better the synthetic or analytic way. Mm-hmm. And the research behind that really is about that it's systematic and intentional, and then there's practice directly following. So it's about, when you think of it in that synthetic format, it's because the thing has been shown to be most effective for our dyslexic students, or our students with that have dyslexia characteristics, is that they have intentional instruction. And then because it is so purposeful and organized and systematic, that the students, they have more opportunities for practice. So it's just shown to be very effective for them because it gives them the opportunity to have the learning and the instruction, and then it repeats, and then there's authentic practice, whether it's in what they read in decodable text or what they write, that in, you know, when they're doing maybe dictation. So if you're doing, you know, once students move into that phonics piece and they're doing dictation, so that they're doing the blending of letters, or they're dictating words into short sentences, they have a lot more purposeful practice. And that's the part that really shows to be most effective with them. All phonics instruction is effective, but really what's shown to be most beneficial in that synthetic approach is the organization, the intention, and the instruction, and then that practice that refers back, because you weren't finding, you know, oh, we're reading this book, look, it's the word cat, let's think all the words we can have with cat, because you might not come back to that for a long time in that as a unit of sound. And when we think of it the other way, they have a lot more purposeful practice. Absolutely, in pre-K, those visuals are really important. Adding body movements and connecting visuals and actions to sounds really gives them those concrete connections, which are great. I did see, Mary, that somebody asked to see my picture next time. I'll have to make sure I turn my video on next time so that we can do that. Leanne is on there, though. We can all look at her. I think you might be the only person with video on, but yeah, Aaron, so that the school that I visited was also used the Jolly Phonics program. And it's those connections. So for those of you who aren't familiar, Jolly Phonics it's a program that's out of England. Some schools are using it here, and they've had a lot of success with it. Again, it's a synthetic program, but it has, when they start, that's one of the things that they do is very purposefully make those first sound connections, and each sound is associated with a movement. And so it was very funny. I would watch the kids that did it, and I'm not sure if you saw this, Aaron, but watch kids that did it, and they would get to the beginning, and they might be writing sun, and they couldn't, the first thing that came to them was the practice of the movement of the kind of making that hand motion of the snake that goes with the little story. And then they would connect it to the sound, and then they would connect it to the letter and write down the F. And so it was so interesting to watch that happen with students. It was a really interesting thing to have happen. So let's see, Liz, when it comes to letter formation, it has been a big challenge for folks. Lynn is asking, when we think about letter formation and trying to blend all of those things together, the letter sound, the letter, the letter sound, the letter shape, the letter formation, and then having the time in a day to teach all of those things. And that is one thing that people are constantly working on, how we can do that. Because handwriting without tears, like you said, Liz, is a different, the letters aren't in the same order. And so people have done, we had a first grade teacher come and talk about how she did it. And she said her kids adjusted to it pretty well, even though they did 2 separate orders. And then some people have reordered and done them to try to match. So it's just, you're going to have to kind of think about your learners as you go along and what that might look like for them, and how you can make that work. But again, just getting back to practicing and doing that as much as you possibly can. So I want to click on this next screen so people have time to do that. So I'm going to leave this up here for a bit. So you can see the QR code. If you have a smartphone, you can take a picture of the QR code. And if you do not, if you look, there's a big long code, which I put there because that was the link that came up first. But if you see the thing that starts with let me close this so I can see this. So if you see this part, see if I can, there it is right here. So if you see this part, this HTTPS, this is a bit.ly link. Which will take that code that is above there, and it will shorten it significantly. So what I'm going to do, though, if you have your, I am going to open this up. This is what I practiced before. So I am going to, if you have your, chat box open, hopefully that will come back. Oops, I'm gonna put this in for everybody. This link, this really long link, I'm going to put in the chat box. And so if you might be able to click on that. And then there's also the bit.ly link. So there are two options there, or you can use that QR code. If you have a phone, it'll take you right to the thing. So Melanie, you are on your phone. So for those of you who are just listening, the link is, if you email me, I can certainly do that. But if you click on HTTPS, and then you have the colon bit.ly/2 Y like yellow, R for run, S for funny, Y for yellow, N for new, and 9. And they were working. Let's see. I'm going to try it for my screen here. So I'm logged into my other one. Oh, I think it's because, oh, let me look, because it was case sensitive. That's why. Hold on, let me get the right case for that. I think that the font that I used when I was doing this was all uppercase. See if that works, that bit.ly link. And the QR code did work. Let's see. And try the bit.ly that I just sent in that has the lowercase letters. Oh, that one worked. It's because those tents for letters in there. So that one works. That last one that I put, the QR code does work. And then the bit.ly that I added, which is under Leanne's name, also worked. Where did that one go? I clicked on it and it worked. But once I clicked on it, it brought QR code does work. And that, oops, there it is right there. Oh, I'm going to hit stop recording because I don't need to keep recording.